Well, first I must say this probably is the most attended Holy Thursday Mass I've ever had here in 26 years. This is a very large Holy Thursday crowd. And I also want to thank Gordon Peck for going to the Chrism Mass this morning. This morning, Archbishop Vigneron and the bishops consecrate all the holy oils that we use during the year for not only for the baptisms, but for those who are confirmed and everyone who's coming into the church Holy Saturday night and who are baptized in the course of the year, and will be also the young people preparing later on for confirmation. As you know, the oil requiem is over there in the back, but thanks again, Gordon. Appreciate you for going. Okay. Tonight, Jesus Christ begins the Eucharist. He takes this Passover, and instead of just remembering an event, a very important event and a very powerful event, where at the very first Passover, the angel of death passes over the Israelites and spares them what the angel of death is going to do to the firstborn among Pharaoh, and causes Pharaoh to set them free. They were passed over death for one day. But in instituting the Eucharist, Jesus Christ gives us an opportunity to pass over death for all time. But Eucharist sometimes, we often, myself included too over times, is we get a very self-centered view of Eucharist. Sometimes we just think, God's giving this to me and that's great. It's like when a child gets a present. You know, it's a beautiful thing to get. But as we grow older, we realize someone had to buy that present. Someone had to purchase that present. Maybe a parent or a grandparent had to make a sacrifice to get the child. But we realize that when we get older, and then when we reflect upon what we just was happy to get as youngsters, we realize that this probably wasn't all that easy for them to do. You know, someone made a sacrifice for us to receive this. And so when we receive the Eucharist, oftentimes we're concerned about, our problems, our concerns, what's going on in our life, and we don't reflect enough about, well, what did the Lord do to make this happen? What's the sacrifice God made for us? And that's a challenge for all of us, because the more we're able to concentrate on the sacrifice that God gave for us, then we'll be inspired in receiving, and not just to bring to the Eucharist as we receive our own problems and concerns, but maybe challenged in sacrifice to think about others. Because what we receive from the Eucharist is what we open ourselves to receive. God is love. He's freely given to us, which means it can freely be rejected or freely be accepted. God never forces himself on anybody. And we can take an example from the apostles. Beautiful examples in the apostles. What did the apostles bring to the first Mass, to Holy Thursday Mass? What did they bring to it? And if we pour through the scriptures and realize that it really was a mixed bag. I mean, quite literally, they brought their loyalty, for they had been with him for 3 years. They brought with him a sacrifice, because they left their jobs, they left their boats, they left their tax collecting posts in the case of Matthew, and they followed him. They took a chance. They took a leap of faith to follow him. Were they perfect? By no means. They brought their pride. Remember James and John saying, "Dear Lord, when you get into your kingdom, let us sit on your right hand or your left hand," And Jesus, says, that's reserved for somebody else. And they brought their jealousy, because after, James and John said that, the other apostles were very angry with them. And they did things that Jesus had to correct them for, and the children ran up to Jesus, and the apostles were shunning them away, and Jesus says, bring the children unto me, don't chase them away. Or they brought their misunderstandings. They misunderstand many times what Jesus was saying. One of the famous ones is they're on a boat, and they're crossing the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is telling them, beware of the leaven of Herod. And what Jesus is talking about is the temptation of the devil that had tempted Herod to kill John the Baptist. And what's the apostles' response? They thought Jesus was upset because they had brought no bread. They understand. They brought their own misunderstandings. So from loyalty and a leap of faith, jealousy and pride and confusion, it was all there in them. No different than any of us here. No different than any single one of us here, because we're all here because we have faith. That's why we're here. We've all taken that leap of faith. But none of us are perfect. All of us know that there are areas where we need to grow. So when we receive the Eucharist, be open, not just to our immediate needs, but think more wholly about your entire life. Ask Jesus to strengthen the things that you've been working on. You know, if you're working on charity and you're trying to be charitable, ask to be more. If you have jealousy, ask God to take it away. Ask for a humble heart. Ask the Lord in receiving the Eucharist, not just limiting yourself to receiving the body and blood of Christ, which is itself is something absolutely fantastic, but let that grace take effect. Let it grow. Let it take root deep inside of every one of us so that the Eucharist transforms us into beings closer to God. Perfection comes only when we get to the heavenly gates. And yes, every one of us is going to stumble and fall and make mistakes on the way. But every single time we receive the Eucharist, remember, God's there again saying, I'm with you, I'm together, I'm inside you, and I'm walking with you all the way to the last day when you enter the kingdom of heaven.